Cold northerly winds diving down from polar regions, dropping the temperatures in a big way. And it's certainly a case of not packing away your winter woolies just yet, because for some of us, we'll be looking at a return of some snowfall. Sophie.
Thank you very much. Well, that is it from us on the BBC News at 6. The news, of course, continues here on BBC One. It's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Goodbye.
Thank you, Sophie. Welcome to Spotlight. Tonight, frightened she'll die of starvation. A family calls on doctors at a Devon hospital to break with protocol to treat her. Alice Barrett has ME and is so weak she now can't feed herself. Also this evening, facing questions is Westminster. Spaceport Cornwall says a failed mission has brought success.
We're in global newspapers all around the world. We've been inundated with space companies wanting to come and locate in Cornwall. We're about to open a brand new building for satellite manufacturing and satellite data companies. That's full.
Investing in sport and well-being, the £21 million partnership, a win-win for players and the public.
And it's the first day of spring. I'm here at Coteal finding out what blooms are on show.
The family of a young woman with ME being cared for at the Royal Devon and Exeter Hospital fear there's a risk she could die from starvation. Alice Barrett from East Devon is so severely ill she can't feed herself or sit upright. Her mother and sister are giving her meals through a syringe. But as her health deteriorates, they're calling on doctors to break from the hospital's protocol and try alternative methods to help save her life. Gemma Woodman reports.
Vivacious and full of energy, Alice Barrett here on her graduation day, looking forward to life ahead. But 2 years ago, the 25-year-old was diagnosed with ME. Her condition has rapidly deteriorated. Alice is now so weak, her family are feeding her via a syringe in hospital, but say she's not getting enough food and needs tube feeding. The hospital says it's following guidance where to do this, the patient needs to be more upright at 30 degrees as there's a risk of choking. But Alice, her family and sister Rosie Barrett believe her system won't tolerate this and have taken specialist advice on another method.
Why is it important that your sister is fed through a tube lying down?
Alice has very severe ME and also a syndrome called POTS. Which means any elevation of her while she'd be feeding would have a negative effect on her. All her symptoms would get worse, and she's at such a critical point at the moment, her body would start shutting down.
Rosie claims Alice is only getting around 600 calories a day.
We're taking too long at the moment to actually get a feeding plan in place for Alice, and yeah, her body will shut down and we'll miss the boat.
And you're worried that she will starve?
Yeah, definitely. She said to us 2 days ago her body's starving.
Fighting for her sister's life is taking its toll. ME is a complex illness. There's no single laboratory test to diagnose myalgic encephalomyelitis. Specialist Dr. William Weir has helped develop clinical guidance for ME.
They're usually tend to want to lie flat because their circulating blood volume is very low. And again, there is scientific evidence from a number of studies which show that to be the case. And in the first instance, the important thing for any patient in this situation is to feed them.
Rosie's base for the last 3 weeks has become a camper van in the hospital car park.
Yeah, since the 10th of February we've been in. Yeah.
Living out of a van and living on
the floor.
Hospital floor, is that right?
Yeah.
Another patient, Meave Boothby O'Neill, who was also treated for ME at the hospital, died more than a year ago.
No one was available to be interviewed from the hospital, but a spokesperson for the Royal Devon and Exeter Healthcare Trust said that this is a deeply upsetting time for Alice and her family. And the complete focus of Alice's clinical team is to provide her with the safest possible care. And we are drawing on NICE guidance, they say, and the expertise of national specialists to do this.
The cause of Alice's condition isn't known, but it's thought it was brought on by a virus. Her family's desperate hope now is to do all they can to keep her alive.
She means the world to me.
Gemma Woodman, BBC Spotlight.
Next tonight, it was going to be a UK first, but it ended in disappointment. Almost 2 months ago, the eyes of the world were on Cornwall for the historic launch of satellites into space. Today, MPs have been looking at what lessons need to be learned. And Kirk England has the latest. Kirk.
Thanks, Victoria. Well, it was a massive moment when Virgin Orbit's jumbo jet Cosmic Girl took off from Newquay with Launcher One, that rocket containing those satellites. But a technical problem, meant that they couldn't be put into orbit. Now, that meant massive disappointment that the UK and Cornwall hadn't taken that giant leap into the satellite space race. Well, the head of Spaceport Cornwall told MPs today that she had received thousands of letters from children around the world who'd been inspired by the launch and that she felt the investment in space was worth it.
There has been questions, obviously, with the major council investment into this, about, what is the future of this? What does it mean? Was it good value for money for Cornwall? And I would say 100%, if anything, from that inspiration side, but also the fact that we were in global newspapers all around the world. We've been inundated with space companies wanting to come and locate in Cornwall because of the launch. We're about to open a brand new building for satellite manufacturing and satellite data companies. That's full, and we haven't even opened it yet because of the interest on the back of the launch.
Well, MPs also heard from one of the companies that had a satellite on board Launcher One. It ended up in the sea. Now, Spaceforge say that their next satellite will be launched from the USA.
We unfortunately don't know when the next launch from Cornwall is going to be. As a startup, we can't afford to wait. The launch then not succeeding now means that we're around 6 months behind our competitors in deploying this technology.
Now, understatement alert. Going into space is complicated. There's lots of paperwork, licenses and things like that. And some have said that in the UK, it all takes much too long and costs too much. But the head of the Civil Aviation Authority, which hands those licenses out, said today that safety is not negotiable, but he welcomed the encouragement for all involved to move faster. But still, Victoria, we still don't know when that next launch from Cornwall is going to be.
Kirk, thank you very much indeed. Now, it's called green electricity, Exeter City Council's very own supply. Harnessed from a solar farm that the council owns, its battery storage has just started up and is powering 3 council sites in the city, including the high-power machinery at the recycling centre. And as Johnny Rutherford reports, it's also charging the new electric collection lorries.
This solar farm and its special way that it stores its own power is Exeter's latest project in saving energy bills and cutting carbon. And it's powering everything that's going on in there. Exeter's recycling centre. The electricity from the farm is off-grid and totally owned by the council. Green electricity, locally produced and sustainable.
This is a really important project because what it does do is reduce the amount of carbon we produce as a council. We are committed to bring our carbon emissions down to net zero. That means that we don't generate carbon emissions that we don't offset, and we're looking to minimise the amount we offset.
New electric refuse lorries are also powered from the farm.
I'm really excited about the charging infrastructure that we've installed as part of this project. It's the latest cutting-edge technology for charging, and locally, regionally, perhaps even in Europe, heavy goods charging of this nature, this is a first. The advantage of this charging infrastructure is that each charging post is individually controlled. So the council can power up charging when it needs to get its vehicles back out on the road, or we can slow charge overnight to reduce our consumption and take advantage of the battery storage that we've installed and use all our renewable energy from the solar farm site.
Not all the bin lorries are electric, but the plan is to eventually renew the 8 currently on this site.
The 3 that we've got, the electric trucks here, that's saving 35,000 litres of diesel per year. And that equates to 103 tonnes of carbon emissions. And that's what we won't be putting into the streets of Exeter.
The council says the project alone will save £250,000 per year in revenue costs. It will take 8 years for the solar farm to pay for itself, and because the council own the electricity it produces, it will offer security over energy and price increases. Johnny Rutherford, BBC Spotlight, Exeter.
Plymouth Argyle is to build a new training academy for youth players as part of a £21 million deal announced today. The pitches and facilities at the Brickfield site in Devonport will also provide a permanent home for the women's first team. Work is expected to start on the project next year, as John Danks reports.
Brickfields is a place in the city more associated with rugby and athletics, but soon it'll be a base for young footballing talent.
We're currently working over around 11 different sites of the academy, so having a central venue is really important. It will provide more contact time with younger players with the staff, and also to making sure that we can retain people, and people also think from Devon and Cornwall, okay, where's the best place for my football journey? Should be Plymouth Argyle, we hope.
Plans for the site include 3 new grass football pitches and an all-weather training pitch for Plymouth Albion, who play at Brickfields.
As we're trying to grow, the 3G that's going to be provided is going to be really, really important to us. So with the youth section that's now starting to grow and starting to pick up, it's sort of future-proofing the club.
The £21 million investment here includes £2.7 million from the local authority.
It actually keeps everything together for the community. The community's getting a big deal out of this. We've protected their uses of the facilities here and everything else, and that will be written into the lease agreement that we're doing. It's protected forever. So, you know, no one, when they get too big, if Argyle ever make it into the Premier League, they won't be able to turn around and say, no, we don't want the community bit there.
Work on the site could begin early next year. Once completed, it'll mark a significant moment in Plymouth Argyle's development and ambition as a club. John Danks, BBC Spotlight, Devonport.
A roundup now of other stories making the news here in the southwest, and the Home Office has confirmed that Torbay Council's application for a judicial review on the decision to house asylum seekers at hotels in the Bay has been refused. Last year, the council raised a number of concerns about the move, including the pressure it was having on its children's services. The Home Office says it's been clear that the use of hotels needs to stop and that it's working to find longer-term options. Exmoor and Dartmoor National Parks are both receiving a grant of £440,000 from the government. The cash is designed to support services including visitor centres and park rangers. It's also been confirmed that the Farming in Protected Landscape scheme will be extended for another 2 years. Councillors in Dorset have voted unanimously in favour of a policy to double council tax on second homes and implement an empty home surcharge at 1 year rather than the current 2-year limit. The final vote will be at a meeting later this month, but the legislation would then have to be approved by Parliament. Dorset Council expects the policy to bring in an extra £10 million a year. There have been reports of a small earthquake on Scilly, felt by some residents on St Mary's. According to the British Geological Survey, an earthquake of 1.7 magnitude has been reported around 16 kilometres southeast of the islands. Further education college principals from the region have joined colleagues nationwide for a so-called day of action at Westminster. They say the sector desperately needs more investment from the government if it's to train the workers needed to deal with significant skills shortages in the economy. Our political editor Martin Oates is at Westminster for us this evening. Was this protest a surprise, Martin?
Well, certainly talking to the principal of the Cornwall Colleges Group, part of the delegation here today, this is a sector which for a long time has got its head down, tried to make ends meet, but he says something will now have to give. FE colleges specialise in practical vocational training. And the Cornish delegation here today, following the protest across the road there in Victoria Tower Gardens, went on to meet Cornwall's 6 MPs. This is what John Evans, the principal of the Cornwall Colleges Group, had to say to me about why he was here today.
But for the last 10 years, we've had no increase. And I've now supposed to appoint enthusiastic plumbers, electricians, mechanics, agricultural engineers to teach those of the future for £28,000. And I just can't do it. And in some areas I'm having to shut courses because I can't find people to teach them. We talk about schools, and I understand schools are short of funding, but in that period they've received 44% more funding than we have. They absolutely deserve it, but my issue isn't that. My issue is that we haven't received anything.
Martin, what's the government saying?
Well, I received a statement from the Department for Education shortly before coming on air. They say they've increased funding for 16 to 19-year-olds in FE colleges by 2.2%, and today announced a similar rise for adult education in FE colleges. I checked that with Mr. Evans. He says the 2.2 rise was effectively cancelled out by cuts elsewhere. He clearly feels that more is very much needed. This is an opportune time to be asking the government for money, in the sense that in exactly 2 weeks' time the Chancellor will be standing up in the House of Commons behind me to unveil his budget. But of course there will be a lot of competing pressures on that. He mentioned schools there. Tomorrow we'll be hearing from striking teachers saying they desperately need more money and better pay, and they've got a recruitment crisis because they can't pay competitive salaries.
Martin Oates, Westminster, thank you. The fascinating stories of thousands of Somerset patients suffering mental illness are being revealed for the very first time. They were all cared for at what was called the Somerset and Bath Pauper Lunatic Asylum. Records of their lives are now being painstakingly uncovered by a small group of volunteers. Sarah Jane Bungay has been finding out more.
Gertrude James from Lyon Mendip. Reason for admittance, idiocy. Died, aged 11.
Donald Clothier from Gorhampton near Yeovil. His manner and expression are dull and stupid. He can only answer simple questions.
Selina Bass from Shepton Mallet, admitted with mania, was demented, incoherent and noisy, a patient for 38 years.
The terms dementia and schizophrenia weren't known of when the patients entered the asylum. Instead, they were labelled lunatics or imbeciles. But life there was far from being locked up without stimulation. This asylum was forward-thinking in giving the men, women and children respect, fulfilment, a sense of purpose.
The first medical superintendent was Dr. Robert Boyd, and he believed in the moral treatment of the insane. He believed in entertainment as therapy, cleanliness, good nutrition, occupation and kindness above all else. There was a mixed patient and staff football team, cricket team.
For decades, the notes detailing the lives of the patients have been stored away, hidden from view, but slowly and sensitively they're being revealed.
I go to Taunton Archives and do the research with my mum and dad. We sit for days on end, just going through all the patient files and getting the photographs and learning all about their history.
What are some of the stories that have stuck with you? Are there any that are really standing out?
A little boy called Joseph Tye, who went in when he was 10 and then came out and then ended up going back in and ended up dying in the asylum. So he's here, he's buried here.
I can see it.
I love him so much, he's so emotional. He's over in Plot F over there. So yeah, I talk to him quite often. I talk to all of them.
Almost 3,000 people are buried here at the cemetery. There wasn't any money for the majority to have headstones, so instead they had a numbered iron marker showing where that person was laid to rest. But over the years, many of these markers have become moved, have become lost. But some are stored here at the graveyard and are just waiting to go back to where they belong.
There is one area of the cemetery which is preserved. And with a bit of historical detective work, the aim now is to connect the remaining patients to the unmarked plots.
And they may not have a monument like this, but they will have their records there and people can come and find them, relatives, but also out of interest, reading about the working classes of the 19th century.
This is a social history project touching on poverty, mental illness, disability, and kindness. For the patients who endured so much during their lives, now a time to be honoured and remembered. Sarah Jane Bungay for BBC Spotlight.
Fascinating. Now, it's been 3 years. Several tents have done their duty, but now the end is near for a camping trip that's been a huge money spinner for a Devon hospice. Max Woozy, also known as the boy in the tent, has decided to end his charity challenge and go back inside. Yet, as John Henderson reports, he won't be tucking up in his bedroom quite yet.
Hi, I'm Max. This is my home. As you can see, I've got all my teddies.
He's been a happy camper for a long time. After 3 years in one of these, it's time for Max to start thinking about taking his tent down.
It's been an incredible 3 years. I've had some of the best opportunities I could have had. Sadly, it had to come to an end at some point. I think I'm 13 years old now, so I started at 10, so it's been a brilliant adventure for me.
An adventure that began on the 29th of March 2020 in tribute to neighbour Rick Abbott, who gave Max a tent before he died of cancer.
He was amazing. He loved the outdoors. He said to me, "You've got to promise me that you'll have an adventure," and I said, "Yes, I will. I promise you that."
So started the big sleep out in the back garden at Braunton.
Do you want to leave your sleeping bag here because it's going to get soaked?
Worst time when a tent pole snapped.
It was chucking it down, and of course it's 10 o'clock, so that's late for me.
Sometimes Dad Mark pitched in with a sleepover.
Boxing Day 2020. He's fast asleep.
There was lots of support along the way.
What an incredible achievement.
To Max raising over £700,000 for North Devon Hospice.
That amount of money effectively has paid for about 15 of our nurses for 1 year.
Max has one more month sleeping under the stars before packing away his tent, but he's not going straight back to his bed.
Then more slowly, go inside and build my way back to bed. Have to start from the floor and go upwards.
So not many nights like this left for the young king of camping. John Henderson, BBC Spotlight.
What an adventure. Now, today marks the first day of spring, according to the meteorological calendar. Days are getting longer and the dawn chorus is getting louder. Crocuses, snowdrops and daffodils. Anaval has been to Cotil near Sartash, with lots of things are blooming marvellous.
A splash of colour, a purple haze, and a call to say spring is finally here.
We know spring is here because of the colours that start to appear in the garden and the scents. You've got the beautiful purple crocuses, little droplets of snowdrops, the daffodils and lovely smells of the other flowers.
A sure sign warmer, longer days are on their way. But is this season right on time?
I think we've seen a lot of plants coming out when we'd usually expect to see them. The thing we've noticed is that it hasn't rained as much, so perhaps things are a little bit drier than we would normally expect.
Nothing says spring like the daffodil, and there are more than 300 varieties of this sunny flower in these gardens alone, with some dating back to the 17th century.
This delicate flower is called a tête-à-tête, and it's one of the earliest varieties to bloom.
This field was just one of many used in the Tamar Valley flower trade. When the Second World War came along, everything changed, but now it's returning to its heritage.
Historically, we know that they had daffodils growing in here, and they were the ones that were sent off to London to be sold, aptly named Fortune because they could make quite a lot of money from growing them. During World War II, they were taken out and the fields were used for the war effort, so we decided to replace them and grow some lovely daffodils ourselves.
stunning, and I love snowdrops. I love snow. I don't particularly want any.
Yeah, there is a hint of something wintry in the forecast. Yes, I'll come to that. So Anna was saying spring is round the corner. Maybe not this week or next week, but maybe the week after. Thank you, Victoria. Hello, good evening. Yes, there is a change to colder weather. I know it's been pretty cold already, but that'll happen after the weekend in front of us and into next week. I'll give you a hint of that in just a second. But I'm going to very quickly look back at the month of February. One thing that stands out is the lack of rainfall. These are the rainfall amounts that we've had for Plymouth, Exeter and Camborne. Notice Exeter, just 8 millimetres of rain. Now, the average is around 65 millimetres for the 4 weeks of February. So, yes, we're down, and parts of the southwest have only had 12% of the normal amount of rain they expect to see in the month of February. As for the forecast, there isn't much in the forecast at the moment. In fact, today there's been a few showers around and we've had rather leaden skies. This is Dorset from earlier today. You can see the cloud fairly thick, and it has been producing a few light showers here and there. And this is Sibleyback in Cornwall, where the cloud again quite thick in places, and we've had 1 or 2 showers over high ground at times today too. And when you look at the hedgerows and the fields and the trees, yes, in some shelter gardens the flowers are coming out, but the trees at the moment are not showing a great deal of leaf or flower. And the forecast for the next few days with fairly low temperatures is probably going to keep things slow growing at the moment. A touch of frost for tomorrow, patchy cloud and some afternoon sunshine. The cloud that we've had today is still quite thick, still producing a few showers, but eventually it'll move away from us. And as that happens, we'll get some clear skies developing tonight, turning quite cold. Very similar weather setup. We saw this early in the week, hasn't changed much. High pressure to the north of Scotland, low over the eastern side of Scandinavia. That gives us northeast winds. They stay with us as we go through Friday and into the weekend. This cold front introducing Arctic air as we go from Sunday into the early part of next week. That's a much lower temperature, so temperatures are coming down as we go through the weekend into next week, and we could be seeing daytime temperatures 4 to 6 degrees and the risk of some wintry showers at the same time. The forecast for tonight, lots of cloud, a few spots of rain out of that cloud, but eventually starting to break, allowing some clear skies to develop, particularly before it gets light tomorrow morning, and overnight temperatures close to freezing, perhaps a bit colder than they were last night, lower than they were last night. Tomorrow, though, is a nice day. Lighter winds. There's always going to be some cloud around, perhaps more than this is suggesting, but it is a dry, fine afternoon with 7, 8, maybe 9 degrees, the maximum temperature. Isles of Scilly here, some cloud first thing and then fine and dry with improving conditions. Quick look at the times of high water. Plymouth, that's at 2:17, 14:17. The outlook is getting colder, as I've mentioned. As we go into next week, Monday and Tuesday, the chance for wintry showers. Have a nice evening. Victoria.
David, thank you. And any signs of spring that you have, if you've got any photographs, do send them to spotlight@bbc.co.uk. We'll try and show them this week. Thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow.